Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to TacticalBassin. Today we're talking finesse fishing. A little bit of spinning rod and a whole lot of bait finesse, BFS fishing. We're talking about some different techniques you can use to take advantage of light line fishing as we head into the late summer. Today is all about finesse fishing. Mostly we're talking bait finesse, BFS fishing. If you're not familiar with that, I'll take a second at the start of the video here to explain what that is. But this same information, the baits that we're going to talk about, they're going to apply whether you're a guy who wants to use a spinning rod or a guy who wants to use a bait caster. This is traditional finesse. This is BFS or bait finesse. Either way, this information will help you as we head into the later part of summer and into the early fall. What I want to do today is talk about some of the key light line applications that are tangibly different. Things that truly catch more fish this time of year than if I upsize and do it on heavier tackle. I've got a handful of techniques that are incredibly effective on light line. Now let's just take a second and talk what BFS is, okay? The concept here, this is not new. This came over from Japan several decades ago, realistically, but it has just exploded in the last couple of years. It began with the arrival of the Curado BFS to the US market. That made bait finesse affordable to the average US angler without importing tackle or paying exorbitant prices to give this a try. So when that Curado BFS came over, this entire bait finesse thing began to explode. But what it is fishing all your traditional finesse techniques with a bait caster. Now for a guy who spends the vast majority of his time with a spinning reel already, if you look at the deck of your boat and it's mostly spinning reels, bait finesse is not as impactful for you. Probably the biggest thing that it will do for you is allow you to cast quite a bit farther with ultralight techniques. But for the angler who uses casting gear the majority of the time, you know, I'm here on the Tennessee River. Most people power fish, but they carry a spinning rod or two. Sometimes they need to drop shot or do something else. For them, that switch over to spinning gear can be fairly uncomfortable. They're not used to it. Being able to pick up that bait caster, have your retrieve speed be the same, you're not adapting to a spinning reel. Same retrieve speeds, same rod positioning, same hook sets, everything is the same, but now you're able to throw ultralight presentations. And I mean, we're talking, once the gear is adapted and you've learned how to do it, we're talking a gram or two. 3 grams is easy. Being able to throw really, really light baits. I mean, what does that translate to in the US? I'm talking throwing 1/32, 1/16 ounce, 1/64 ounce even. Ultra lightweight on bait casters without backlashing. In some instances, being able to skip up under cover with tiny baits and being able to target those fish effectively. Accurate casts, you're able to stay low to the water. You're not bombing a spinning rod in there. And then distance. It is remarkable. Once you've dialed in a BFS reel, be it a Curado BFS, an Aldebaran BFS, Cast King Zephyr, there's a handful of options. Once you've got these things dialed in, this is a Megabass Karashi. It weighs nothing. You can just send that thing. Just send it. It's crazy what you can do with this lightweight stuff. And that was with dry braid and everything. I wasn't sure that one was gonna go smoothly. But seriously, you can throw them so far. You can throw them low to the water. You can be very accurate and fish those baits effectively on that casting gear. All right, so now you're sort of caught up. If somehow you have missed the BFS train, you're not familiar, you didn't know what that was, now you're sort of caught up. It's just taking everything you know about finesse fishing and doing it effectively with a bait caster, in a lot of instances, not only doing it effectively, but doing it more efficiently. Now, what I want to talk about today is, whether you're a spinning rod guy or a bait finesse guy, a handful of downsized finesse presentations that are just different and that shine as we head into late summer and early fall. Because a lot of guys this spring, last fall, bought into bait finesse. They got a combo, they got 2 combos, they cracked fish on them all spring, but come summertime, they're out there deep cranking, throwing jigs, big worms, shaky heads, right? And all of a sudden, your bait finesse rod is collecting dust, and it doesn't need to. I have been, thriving this summer throwing bait finesse, having a ball. And you're listening to this from a guy who is known for throwing giant swim baits, right? For decades, we threw giant baits for giant largemouth and spotted bass. Now we're talking about micro baits. We do all of it. But I'm telling you, this is so effective that I'm finding myself on the Tennessee River, traveling the country, going up north, throwing so many different things on bait finesse. It is taking over the deck of my boat so quickly. Now, there's a place for a swim bait, a jig, a big worm. Those are never going away. But when I downsize, when I go to finesse, now I really downsize, because I see the value in going extra small and doing it effectively. Before, it was very hard to do it well. It was hard to downsize and have accurate presentations, precise casts. I had to buy a lot of very specific gear. Like, this is what I threw the Karashi on when I first found the Karashi. This is a Megabass P5 baby plugging paired to a Vanford 2000. Hands down, my favorite spinning combo to throw a Karashi. Hands down. But I've latched on to throwing it on bait finesse so much that I don't do it with that spinning rod much anymore. I prefer it on a bait caster. But the point being, when I wanted to throw a Karashi on spinning, I wasn't able to do it effectively on just any spinning rod. I had to buy a very refined rod. The baby plugging, if you want to do it on spinning gear, the baby plugging is awesome. Hands down my favorite rod to do it. But I had to get a downsized reel. This is a 2000 size, really light braided line to be able to really launch that bait. But when I switch over to bait finesse, there's a handful of rods I can throw it on effectively, which is really, really nice. So let's jump into the presentations themselves. I think we've talked enough about the category. Basically, I've got 6 styles of bait that are going to be very effective as we go into fall. This is the first one. They're in no particular order, okay? Here's the first one right here. Most of us love throwing a SENKO. Maybe we don't love it, but most of us throw a SENKO. There's a time and a place where if you're not doing it, you are blowing it, right? Up around shallow cover, fish pull up into that stuff, especially heat of the day. There's a lot of other baits we like to throw for them. I like to swim bait for them. I like to wake bait around the edges of docks. I like to throw a jig. But some days, the SENKO just gets it done. Well, a 5-inch SENKO is actually a pretty heavy bait. Not very effective on bait finesse. But what I found, and actually, this is the rod I've been doing it with. This is a Megabass also. This is the Pop-X stick. Crazy light rod. It's a 1-power rod. 6'3", 1 power, okay? I've been doing it on 6-pound fluoro, and I'm gonna come back to this fluoro. We need to talk about this. Don't let me forget. But what I've been doing, instead of throwing a 5-inch SENKO, I've been throwing the 5-inch thin SENKO. Much, much smaller worm, much lighter worm. This is a Hayabusa wacky hook where it's got this fluoro double guard on it, but it collapses like nothing. I've been able to throw this on 6-pound fluoro all through the summer. It's been really effective. The same fish that I would normally try and shoot a 5-inch SENKO back up under a dock for, I'm doing it just as effectively, if not more effectively, with the thin SENKO. I'm getting an even slower fall underneath the docks, and it's working really well. I caught a good one at the end of a recent video where I was fishing out offshore, and on my way in, threw the thin SENKO up into a shadow of a bridge and stuck a really good fish. And the fun thing about Bait Finesse is when you hook them on a 6.3 1 power, you are in for a rodeo. I mean, it's out of control. A 3-pound fish is going to tear you apart. Fishing is tangibly more fun when you hook them on that really light gear and you still land them. I mean, I almost never lose fish on this stuff, almost never, because you're not horsing them. They tend to just come out on their own. It's really remarkable. But number one is going to be that thin SENKO. It's the way that we're taking a traditional technique, SENKO fishing, and downsizing it into Bait Finesse. Let's go right here, since I already had it in my hand. Number two, I love to throw a fluke. The later we get into summer, the more grass we have up on the surface, and the fluke is incredibly effective around that grass. I love to throw a Zoom Super Fluke. I love to throw the big X-Zone soft jerk bait. But on Bait Finesse, I have fallen in love with the Jackal Rhythm Wag. This little bait is remarkable. Very specific hook in it. This is a BKK Chimera hook, if I'm not mistaken. I'm gonna fact check myself. If you don't know this, in the video description below the video, in every video, whether it's a full-length video or a short, you can always open the description. If you're watching on our website, just scroll down. If you're watching on YouTube, depending on your device, whether you're on a phone or a computer, you'll either need to hit more and scroll down, or you hit the 3 little dots, then scroll down, hit the 3 little dots again, scroll again. You can even do it on short videos. We include all the information, bait, hook, line, rods and reels, all of it in every video, even in our short videos. I don't think anybody knows that, but you hit those 3 little dots on the top right on a short, and there's a description there. So anyway, I will fact check myself on the exact hook, but this setup right here, it's this particular hook because that hook is really rigid. It's not heavy, but it's stiff. And it allows me to get really powerful hook sets, even on super light line. We ran a short recently that was like something to the effect of like a new BFS trick. The soft jerk bait, specifically that rhythm wag, is insane on Bait Finesse. I have crushed on it. I had a day on Berryessa with my brother. That's back in California when I was out visiting. We were throwing super flukes, catching the occasional fish. I picked up a rhythm wag. It was a better match to the profile of the bait fish that were up in the shallows, and it was instant. I mean, the fish were on it. The later we get in summer, here's the actual mindset behind it. The later we get into summer, the bass fry that was spawned in the spring is getting bigger. The shad spawn that happened in May-ish, depending on where you live in the country, those shad are getting bigger, but they're not full size. As we get into fall, you're gonna have the bluegill growing up. They'll start getting into that 2-3 inch size range. That little rhythm wag is literally a better match to the size of actual bait fish in most lakes in the late summer, early fall than a traditional fluke is. And throwing it on either 6 or 7 pound line, even the wariest of fish come up and just blast that thing. They don't think twice about it. And then again, I've got that BKK hook in there and I stick those fish and it is over. I've been throwing mostly on that same rod, that Pop-X stick, just as light can be. I hit them so hard, this rod folds completely in half. I mean, it looks like it's gonna shatter. It is so much fun. Let's talk about this line for a second. This is something I wanna make sure I take a minute to talk about. I'm always trying new lines, okay? This is a Daiwa fluorocarbon. First thing you're going to notice, it's green. This line is called their hidden fluorocarbon. J-Fluoro, I think it is, but it's the hidden. It's the green tint. You guys know for years I've liked throwing Maxima Ultra Green for leader materials on a lot of different things. I personally have a lot of faith in green line. There are times where clear line is the deal. Traditional fluorocarbon, right? It's the deal. But there are also a lot of times, even in really clear water, where crystal clear, that clear fluorocarbon, when it turns sideways to the sun, it will shine underwater. It has a sheen to it. And I personally have a lot of confidence in that slightly tinted green line. Been doing it my whole life. The reason I'm bringing this up now is I started playing with this back in winter on my Bait Finesse setups. And I've put it on a handful of them now. And the line itself is holding up crazy good. Like, unless I seriously backlash or break off or something, I'm not respooling. I mean, I've got, this one has been spooled up for like 5 months probably. The same fluoro, the same 6-pound fluoro, and I'm still going strong on it. It's remarkable. So I just wanted to take a second, and because it's rare that I find something that stands out that much, right? One of the things about fluorocarbon is you're always stripping it off and replacing it, stripping it off and replacing it. And I don't know why it's different, but this hidden, this green line that I've been using this year is lasting way longer than it should. I've been very, very impressed with it. So if you want to try a light fluoro, and I think it even comes in heavy sizes, but I've just been playing with the light stuff, okay? 6-pound, 7-pound is the main size that I've been using. It's really held up well. All right, next technique. Again, we're going in no particular order here. Little swim bait. A little 1/8 ounce head. Now, if you were to say an 1/8 ounce head in the Japanese market and call that Bait Finesse, I mean, that's not Bait Finesse in Japan. But in the US, things are definitely adapting. Some guys are using their Bait Finesse gear just to throw downsized presentations, right? Throwing an 1/8 ounce head with a 2/8 Kitech, or throwing a slightly smaller topwater, things like that. We're definitely adapting it to the US market and our US styles of fishing. As a whole, US anglers are more aggressive anglers. We set the hook harder, we pull harder on our fish, we use a lot more heavy line than light line. So it makes sense that Bait Finesse, as it has arrived and become popular in the US, it's adapting a little too. So there is some stuff being done on tiny little baits, ultra light line, you know, guys trout fishing mountain streams of Bait Finesse. But there's also, within the US Bait Finesse category, room for throwing those little 1/8 ounce heads with or without a blade. This is Tim and I's tactical finesse underspin that we did with Dirty Jigs this year. 1/8 ounce head. This is the 3-inch X zone. You could also do a 2.8 Kitech. But we all love throwing those tiny little downsized swim baits in the fall around the edges of grass beds, plucking those fish off as they start transitioning really aggressively towards bait fish. That little swim bait is so effective. When I put it on my Bait Finesse gear, I can send it significantly farther. And it's really, really fun. So I wanted to bring that one up. Again, these are in no particular order. The next one up, let's go right here, the Karashi. If you have watched any Bait Finesse content that we've done this year, you've heard me rave about this bait. If you've read the comments section, you've seen the mix of people that are thrilled we told them about it because they're crushing fish, and the guys that are really upset and wishing we would stop talking about it. I understand that. This is a highly effective bait. This little tiny Karashi was the first Bait Finesse bait that I just 100% latched onto. It is remarkable how well it works. It works on the Tennessee River, it works in California, it works on the Great Lakes catching smallmouth, it works chasing spotted bass, largemouth, it works in rivers and lakes. Incredibly effective bait. It's like a half topwater, half subsurface jerkbait-esque style bait. We fish it very fast, very aggressive, typically just below the surface, sometimes popping surface, sometimes a little bit down below. But you fish it very fast, very aggressive, and the fish come out and smash it. Midday, high sun, we slow it down, we begin to slow work that bait. And it works that way too. But an incredible bait. It has crushed all year, and it is continuing to work for me right now. middle of summer, as we head towards fall, will continue to work. You just do not want to overlook the Karashi. That is, as tiny as that is probably the most unique and most effective fish catching new category of bait that I've picked up in the last 5 years. I mean, it crushes them everywhere I go. I throw it on the Cashin 7-foot light is my favorite rod to throw it on. I either throw it on 6 or 7 pound fluoro or super light braid to that same 6 or 7 pound leader. Either one's fine. I've been playing with that Cast King Kestrel. Finally did it. Very impressed. I mean, it will send the bait. Send it. It's really amazing. But that Karashi, add that to the list. So far we've got that downsized SENKO, the downsized soft jerkbait, downsized fluke, that rhythm wag. We've got, you know, the little swim bait. We've got the Karashi. We've got 2 more. Next one up is going to be topwater. Okay. I've got a whole box of topwaters here. In fact, I've got a whole box of Karashis here too. I'm fanatical about these baits. I mean, the damage I do on the Karashi is incredible. So I've got colors to match basically every situation, but any of the generally bait fishy looking colors are going to be fine. Topwater, same deal. It's mostly little walking baits and little poppers, with the exception of a couple of little whopper ploppers. Little whopper plopper 60. I don't even want to open the box. It's so humid today, I don't even want to open my box. But the reason I grabbed it was to show you this, the Owner Cultiva, the Zip and Ziggy. That's the main walking topwater that I've been throwing on BFS for the last year. It worked so well for me early fall last year. Those first cool nights. Now, again, this is reaching a little bit. We're not quite there yet. It's a few weeks away. But those first cool nights, those little bait fish start coming up, start getting corralled. That Zip and Ziggy would destroy over all my traditional larger topwaters. I mean, it worked so well. Now, you guys may have seen, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, Megabass has now released a line of Bait Finesse hard baits as well. Little walking bait, little popper, some crankbaits, some jerk baits, all downsized, all specifically designed to be thrown effectively on Bait Finesse. And I think that's awesome. Earlier this year, Demiki did it. Micro little popper, the smallest one on the market, micro little popper that is so effective, and then a couple amazing little crankbaits. It's awesome to see these brands jumping in. I even saw Strike King at ICAST. Tim and I walked through their booth and they had a display of little Bait Finesse baits they're going to do. I love that companies are jumping on board with this and giving us some different options. But this guy right here is even smaller than the Zip and Ziggy that I've been throwing. And it's just a great 1-2 punch. Where there's the opportunity to give you an alternative like this bait or this bait, I always try to do that because I'm not trying to tell you throw one thing. About the only one of those is that Megabass Karashi, where there's nothing else like it and that bait just crushes all by itself in its own category. But in the rest of the categories, I try to give you options where I can. So this one is the Dog X Junior. Okay, we're all familiar with that general Megabass Dog X shape or style. At least a lot of us are. But this guy, the Junior, is tiny. It's so effective. It sits tail down in the water. It's got a great little walk to it. It walks about that wide, unless I'm really trying to get a wide walk out of it. Just regular casting fishing, it walks about that wide. Awesome little walk. It's got a nice little sound to it. It's not overwhelming. It's a really, really cool bait. So I have been crushing for a year on the Zip and Ziggy, and I just started playing with this guy, but it's awesome to have another bait in that category. And then last but not least, this is something I do a lot in the spring as bass push up around cover to spawn, and then it's something I do again now. And that is Bait Finesse flipping. Sounds insane, I know it does. Hear me out. Here's the deal. I do it with a couple of baits. Z-Man TRD bugs. We also use the Rains 2.5 ring craw. Both are awesome options. What we're doing here is we're taking Bait Finesse. This is the Corrado BFS. Now I've actually spooled it with 12-pound braid, which in Bait Finesse would be really heavy. And then I've gone to an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. Again, for Bait Finesse, I mean, we're talking serious power fishing, right? But I'm going to places where I would normally be flipping 65-pound braid. So normally I'm not talking like punching with this. That's not what I'm talking about. But I am talking about true heavy cover flipping or pitching edges of heavy cover. The places that I would normally take like a 3/4 to 1 ounce weight on 65-pound braid and get right inside the edges of that really thick stuff. Or I would throw a jig on like 20 or 25-pound up in the edges of that heavy cover or grass. Because this is the time of year where you start getting that matted grass and the fish are in there. Traditionally, we're throwing heavy line for all those applications, throwing big profiles, right? Full-size creature bait, full-size jig. Fish are getting pressured. We all know it. That's where my interest in Bait Finesse started. The Tennessee River is a prime example where you used to be able to come out and crush giants on heavy tackle. Now there's a lot of finessing going on. I mean, you drive by guys on the ledges in the summertime and they've all got a spinning rod in their hand. It is a changing game. So for me, Bait Finesse, very natural thing to transition into, because what I have found in my own fishing through the years is that the middle ground is the one place you don't want to be. What I mean by that is if you were throwing a 4.8 Kitech and it was working and then the fish get beat on, I don't keep throwing a 4.8 Kitech. I do one of two things. I throw a 2.8 Kitech or I go throw an 8 or 9 inch swim bait. I go to the extremes, because if you're going to adapt, go all the way, either direction, to really see what's there. Don't continue to play in the middle. Don't go to a 4.3 Kitech to see if you can get a couple more bites. No, go all the way. So for me, it was natural to jump right into Bait Finesse, drop down to super light line, tiny baits, and just see. And then it has worked so well that we've just exploded with it, right? We're using it for all sorts of things we weren't planning on. But let's get back to flipping. These fish are getting pressured. They're getting harder to fool. You're flipping on a hot afternoon for less bites than you've ever been flipping for. I'm going down to 8-pound line, 1/16 ounce tungsten. Very specific hook. That's the Owner riggin hook, 1/0. The riggin hook is wide, very wide gap, but very short shanked. So the 1/0 is important for this hook. That fits very well in both the Z-Man and the Rains, either one. And then I'm taking this and I am literally flipping the edges of heavy cover with it. And I'm sticking fish. I mean, you stick them, and then instead on 65-pound braid, I just start bulldogging, right? Trying to drag them out of there. With this, I don't. These fish that won't bite, they'll bite this. As soon as I stick them, I just stay pressure. Just lean on them. Those fish will sit down there, they'll thrash a little bit underwater. And then do you know what they do next? On their own, they swim out out of the heavy cover, out to deep water, on their own without me dragging them. I just lean back and out they come. It's amazing. I'm getting the same caliber of fish out of heavy cover on 8-pound that I used to get out with 65-pound. Now, I'm not saying there's not days where I pick up 65-pound and go. Absolutely I do. But when I'm in highly pressured situations, I'm doing a lot of this and it's working remarkably well. This is the X-Pride 7.2 medium light. We're gonna call that the flippin' stick of Bait Finesse. Way too heavy for most Bait Finesse techniques, but perfect for this, for Bait Finesse flipping. One of the coolest things is that there's all sorts of other things you can do with this rod. I mean, it's one thing to buy a Bait Finesse rod. It's hard to know which one to get, right? Because a lot of guys are getting one just to dabble. And some of these rods are super light. Some like this are really too stout for a lot of the techniques, but something like a Cash-In 610 medium heavy, perfect for right down the center. You just want to try it with one rod. I mean, that's probably your best rod right now. But that, if you can get your hands on the new X-Pride that came out at the Classic, not at the Classic, at iCast, that one, I felt that one in the booth, felt amazing. I think that's a really good one rod as well. There's a handful of rods that are just remarkable if you're only going to use one. But the cool thing here is you can dabble into the flipping end of Bait Finesse. But this 7.2 medium light has taken over so many things for me, because we talk about this a lot. I've been trying to identify multiple uses for rods for you guys, because it's hard to pick up a rod these days for one thing, right? It's hard to buy a dedicated flipping stick and then that's all it will do. This 7.2 medium light will flip Bait Finesse. It is literally my favorite blade bait rod. It is my favorite tailspin rod, period. Out of all of them, it's my favorite one. It has proven to be really effective for throwing mid-sized topwaters. Didn't see that coming. Ignore the lure rating. Ignore it. This rod can do so many things. I mean, I'm talking about throwing up to like a 1 ounce tailspin on this thing, and it's rated 3/16 to 3. Well, that's a crazy rating anyway. 3/16 to 3/4. It'll do so many things. Something I was surprised it did well for me: compact jigs. So not like a little micro football jig, not a micro jig, but compact jigs like a finesse jig or a compact pitching jig. I've been effectively fishing a jig on it on downsized line, like 12-pound line this summer, smashing jig fish with it. It's amazing how many things it will do. It is probably, I don't want to say it if I can think of another one, but I think it is probably the most universal rod for me in the entire Shimano X-Pride line, 7.2 medium light. It's incredible how many different things I've done with it. I've picked it up when I didn't have a crankbait rod with me and I've cranked on it. I wouldn't recommend deep cranking or square billing on it, but it did it perfectly. I mean, it's not my favorite rod for either of those things, but I was not losing my fish. It's amazing how many different things it will do. Totally an underrated rod. Anyway, back to the setup. Flipping ultralight 1/16 ounce tungsten is crazy effective and will remain effective as long as you've got good grass and cover headed into the fall. And with that, guys, we're going to wrap it up. That's a handful of techniques that you can do on a spinning rod. Absolutely. If you are not a Bait Finesse guy, that's okay. This video applies to you. These techniques are standouts. These are things that are working better for me than their big brothers, than the traditional baits in the categories in most instances. And I've been very surprised by that. So I wanted to give those to you as we head into this time of year. For the guy that's dabbling in Bait Finesse, now you've got an idea of what we're doing. For the guy who's already in and wondering what to try next, those are the things we're fishing. It really is a lot of fun. That is the #1 word that I hear anybody use around Bait Finesse: fun. And until you try it, I can't explain it. But when you go out, whether you're catching big ones or small ones, it doesn't matter. I'm tangibly having more fun on the water sticking those fish on ultralight bait casters. It's a riot. Hopefully this video helped you. If it did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.